Okay, perfect. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar focuses on what's in, what's out, and what's next for social media in 2026. We've got a rockstar group of panelists today, which I'm very, very excited to introduce you to. So to kick things off, I would love to hear from our lovely panelists about your role, where you're at now, your background, and then I've got a fun little icebreaker question. I'd love to hear what is one account that you love or often turn to for inspiration. So, Tori, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Tori, and I'm a senior digital marketing manager at Red Hat. I've spent the last decade in the paid media space, and for the last nearly 6 years, I've been focused on paid social and organic social. We operate with a hub and spoke model. So we have a global organic social team, and then I sit within the paid team in North America. And I focus specifically on the public sector, which requires an extreme level of clarity and trust. So you can't always rely on the flashy creative like some other industries might be able to. So I'm looking forward to talking about some of the high stakes lessons that we've learned today. And then for my account, personally, I really like the National Park Service Instagram. What's great about them, especially from my perspective in the public sector, is how they often share serious public service announcements, but with a personality that really shines through. It just feels to me like the account is run by someone who loves their job.
Yeah, I love that. And who doesn't love like Fat Bear Week and everything? I feel like it's the great mix of our parks and serious stuff, but also why we love following them. Awesome. Sam.
Yes. Hey everyone, my name is Sam. I am a senior communications and culture specialist with Applied Systems. We're an insurtech org. This is actually my first jaunt really into the public sector. Prior to this, I was all nonprofits, higher ed. I did do marketing once for a haunted trail, but that also donated to a nonprofit and maybe one of my top jobs ever. Just because I'm a little spooky weirdo. But anyway, so with working for a B2B SaaS company, one of the interesting things about my role is I kind of approach it as a B2C because I'm managing our employer brand and really trying to reach candidates, positioning ourselves as an employer of choice. So, and a lot of people don't think of InsurTech as fun and sexy, but it is really cool. And I'm a total convert on that. So like telling that story has been a really interesting and unique challenge.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what is one account that
Oh,
you
yes.
love or turn to?
For me, it would have to be the Slack account on LinkedIn. It's always really funny. I really like how they engage with their specific audience. I feel like sometimes on TikTok we get tired of seeing brands jump in the comments to try to achieve that many viral moments. Like Wendy's, love you. You don't belong here. This is not about you. But I feel like Slack really does work with their audience. They bring a lot of humor to it. And yeah, they're one of my favorites to see on LinkedIn, for sure.
That's a great one. And I love your point about, brands dropping in on the viral moments. I can't wait to get into that later. Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Katie, we'll kick it to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am Katie Brevoort, Associate Director of Social Media at REQ. I've also been in social media for about 10 years and really have been focused on the B2C side, building strategies from anywhere from consumer goods, gaming, aviation, and so many brands and restaurants. So I've been through a little bit of everything, but I love that social sits right between culture, relevancy. You get a little bit of paid media and you get to do something new every single day. As far as my favorite brand, I think I to follow on social rather. I probably go through about five that I consistently obsess about. And right now I'm back to Brightland olive oil. They tend to have a very balanced feed that's very creative and social first. And I think that's something we all strive to do on the B2C side. But there's a lot of memes, there's product messaging, and a lot of relevancy that I really love.
Yeah, that's such a great one. And I'm a big fan of that brand too. Awesome. All right. And for everyone, my name is Casey Della Sola. I'm moderating this conversation today. I'm Senior Director at REQ. All right. So to kick things off, I've got a question for all three of you. If you had to pick one shift that will define social media success in 2026, what is it? And what changed to make that shift matter now? Tori, you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think for me, if I'm thinking about the trend that has really shifted, it would be less polish. Across all platforms, I think content that looks like a polished ad underperforms, and content that looks like documentation, news, user-generated content is really what wins. And in my opinion, that's because audiences have stopped buying from the loudest brand in the room, and they've shifted to the most trustworthy and the most helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a really good one. Sam, Katie, love to hear from you.
I'll jump in. I totally agree with you, Victoria, about the authenticity piece, especially in what I feel like we're kind of in a little bit of an age of what I call a misuse of AI, AI slop. We're kind of just generating content or images that, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. And I feel like people really, really don't like that. And they're craving something that is real. And we've seen with influencers specifically, even those behind the scenes, get ready with me or let's check my mail together. It's all very commodified, right? It's like brands that they are covertly trying to promote or things like that. And we see, on LinkedIn, somebody being like, this is what my divorce taught me about B2B sales. And it's like, we're cosplaying relatability and it's just not landing with people. So really having that content that reflects who your brand actually is versus a commodified version of it, I think people are really eager to consume that.
Yeah. Cosplaying. I love that. That's a really great, relatable way to kind of talk about what's going on.
And I think I would echo what you guys both said. I would think human truths and relevancy are the messaging that you really need to lean into moving forward. I think for so long we're so safe in our brand messaging and like towards the AI slop. I feel like everybody's kind of using that same tone, but if you can really break outside the box a little bit and really show how the product makes sense in the environment or it's relevant to somebody else, it drives a little bit more further.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about what's losing impact. What is out? So Sam, Katie, this first question is for you guys. What are some tactics or formats that you've deprioritized or walked away from? And what replaced them that actually drives impact for you?
Yeah, I can start. We've actually been trying to deprioritize single static photos, and it's been a little bit hard, especially on the asset front. But if unless they're really high res from a photographer or you already have that deeply engaged audience, they tend to just get the passive likes, which we're not aiming to do in a lot of our clients right now. So instead, we've really pivoted toward any carousels that tell a story, short form video, that's also still more inherently shareable and engaging. But if there's limited budget, you don't have a lot of assets to work with, we've been getting really creative on zooming into a specific detail or maybe like reversing the image or something like that so it looks a little bit different.
And I'd say one thing we're really shifting to, it's kind of been a few years in the making, is really trying to prioritize that user generated content, right? I can go on our profiles and be like, we're the coolest and the best, and that's fine. And even if it's true, it just doesn't hit the way that content does when it's your advocates sharing it, right? Like it's great to share awards and accolades and product updates, but when you're seeing your team or your audience engaging with it, saying like, this made a difference, or so excited that I got to be on this project, it really just puts your message out further in a way that just coming from the brand can't do alone. And so prioritizing that, we've seen a big rise in engagement with that. And it's just really exciting, right? Like I'm excited about what we're talking about. You're excited. People buy into that energy. It's palpable.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I do feel like with UGC content, I mean, it's so valuable, but it's a lot of work. I mean, sourcing this material. And I know Katie and Sam, both of you guys work, with clients or in fields where UGC content is important. But I'm curious, like, what is your process with getting that content and figuring out, when the right time is to promote it?
I'll say we definitely had to earn a level of trust. You approach somebody, hey, I'd love to get you out there in the open. And, some people I asked for a video and I could probably more easily get 10 grand, like upfront, no questions asked, and somebody agreed to be on video because it feels really intimidating. But I found that, by finding those people who really are, comfortable putting themselves out there, whether for it's a photo or a video, the rest of your audience can see what it is that you're doing. I also never shy away from making the content myself. And I'm not saying publishing it on the brand, but if I'm asking somebody for a specific type of content, I will make it myself and be like, this is what I'm looking for. Because when people have an idea, it feels a little bit less intimidating. I also always go out of my way to assure them, hey, if you don't like it, I'm not putting it out there, right? Like me wanting to publish this is not going to supersede your comfortability. I want you to be proud of it too. And so building that level of trust, letting people know I would do it myself, I'm going to have your back, I think really engages people in a different audience. And then also that snowball effect, right? When you see other people doing it, you're more inclined to do it. And so I think all those things really come together. But to your point, it does take time.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, of course, I got to talk about metrics. Tori, are there any metrics that don't matter as much as they used to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I would have to say gross impressions as well as follower count. I think as we kind of talked about in this era of infinite scroll and lots of AI generated content, an impression can kind of be a vanity metric at this point. And so I care about things like attention quality and dwell time on LinkedIn, like how long did they pause to view our content. There also used to be such an emphasis on follower growth. But I would so much rather have 1,000 people who spend a minute or two with our ideas than have 1 million people see our logo for a fraction of a second.
Yeah, that's a really, really great answer. Katie, what about in the B2C world? What metrics are you starting to shift away from?
Yeah, same thing. I think probably everybody on this call would agree about follower growth as vanity metrics. So I hope I'm in a safe space. But same with impressions too. I feel like you're seeing your eyes, but they're not moving the needle about what people are actually thinking and engaging with your brand. So generally we look at engagement rate because a lot of our B2C brands, that's where they want to play. So then in conjunction with engagement rate, I think it's video watch time too. Just you want to see how people are reacting and actually using your content.
Yeah, very, very true. I think we have all are familiar with Rachel Carton, got a great social media Substack called Link in Bio. And one of her things for what's in and out is like, what's out 10,000 followers versus 100 or 1,000 really dedicated, engaged followers and fans. And I feel like that's definitely being emphasized in what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I'd much rather have like a very small audience that's engaged all the time than getting one like on a post.
Definitely. All right. So let's talk about viral moments because I know we've gotten some questions in the chat here. Do viral moments matter? And, how do you evaluate whether a trend is worth hopping on? I mean, they come and go so fast. So Sam, why don't you kick us off?
I'm glad you picked me because I was about to go regardless because I've got a lot of feelings about this. So I find, back in the day for the children, right? The explore page on Instagram used to be the same for every user. It wasn't like tailored to your algorithm. And so if you had a post that blew up there, like it really meant something for how people would consume and engage with your brand. And I think viral moments still are things that can do a lot for your audience or for engagement. Thinking of, I think it was last summer, Jules on TikTok with her very mindful, very demure, that really caught on. But I think in general, going viral should not be your goal. It's not a sustained path to growth, right? Like, I think part of the reason that people really connected with that bit from Jules was it wasn't the first time she had done something like that. And it also was very authentic to who she was. So when people see that, you're getting big for something that feels true to you, maybe they'll engage with that more. But to your point, Katie, like if sometimes it can be upsetting, right? If you put your heart and soul into some content and like you get 30 likes on it. But somebody put it in context for me once that like if 30 people came up to you on the street and they were like, your outfit is incredible, you would be like over the moon by that. You would be like, I cannot believe that many people said it. And I feel like you have to kind of approach your content like that, you know, like you should want to go viral with your audience. You don't need to go viral with like a way broad thing, right? If you're putting something out there and it's got 25% engagement and, you know, 15 of your teammates have shared it on their own profiles and it's really circulating like that, like that's the sort of viral that I think it's important to chase, not the, you know, 100,000 people like this and then now what? We have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I have to plug, REQ just posted a really funny viral post that I feel like is the perfect example of like jumping on a trend and keeping it appropriate for your audience. So I will plug our Instagram. Everyone should check it out because it's a great one that one of our awesome social media interns did. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a hard question here. Katie, what is something you've actively sunsetted in the last year, and how did you know it was time to move on?
Yeah, so we've really sunsetted branded content, which sounds hard and kind of wild, but I think Tori was talking about this in the very beginning. You don't want people to see your 3-second brand's logo, then move on. But anytime that we would post something that had branded text, branded elements, it just wouldn't do well. So we've really been pushing to just do ad hoc formats where it has in-app text and it looks about the same that you would see from your friend from the brand. And it's been working pretty well. It's definitely been a shift with the client to be like, no, it's okay. We can try something new and give it time to work. But I think using that as kind of your quarter by quarter approach has been really helpful.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point about like pitching this and getting the confidence or buy-in from the client. So in your case, agency facing, going to the client, but sometimes internal social media people, they have to pitch this up the flagpole to leadership. How do
Mhm.
you have that conversation, and how do you kind of get them to buy into the shift that might be really scary at first?
I think data is your best friend. So if you're doing your monthly reporting, your quarterly reporting, look at what's consistently there because there's always a theme. And then I tend to go back into the previous quarter. So when you're pulling all of that, you can say, no, that was in the bottom two. This is in the bottom two. This is where we're going to make our move. But you can show different examples of what other brands are doing. And that's where I think I go to Brightland a lot to say, this is something that's like really balanced, or this is creative and this is what people are seeing and engaging. Let's try something new. And then you just really have to trust and send some metrics as much as possible.
Yeah, that's true. Data is your friend. Okay, well, I want to talk about what's in because we got to look forward now. Um, let's talk about content. So, what type of content or approaches are you seeing that are consistently gaining traction, and what's driving that performance? And Tori, I'd love you to start this one for us.
Yeah, sure. I really think Sam kind of touched on it earlier, but culture really matters. I've noticed across the board for companies that culture posts on LinkedIn, Instagram, they aren't just the nice to have fluff anymore. I think audiences are really caring about that behind the scenes, human centered kind of story, and also local content if you can. So posts like those with a clear call to action, I think are essential for engagement.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Katie, Sam, any thoughts for your content strategy?
Um, yes, I would say like outside of crisis communications, content just isn't that serious. And I don't say that to be flippant or say it doesn't matter because we've all had a boss that's like, can you do a tweet about this? And you're like, yeah, yeah, if that's all you think I do, sure, I will tweet about it. But like to Tori's point, like people want to see that you as a brand aren't that serious, right? Like educational content has its place, product announcements, those things matter and are important to your audience, but it's not all that's important. Like that's not what's really going to make people resonate with you. like I said earlier, you don't think about InsurTech as maybe like one of the coolest places to be, but it is cool because the people behind our products are cool. And the way that they're bringing those things to life are interesting. And the more we kind of pull that curtain back and show people like, hey, these were the brains that went into it. This is how we thought about it. This is how we approached it. This was the success that we had that's going to deliver a success for you. People, we can see it like a real measurable impact on the engagement and how we're seeing, not just those vanity metrics, but like actual conversions.
Yeah, it's a big one with the conversions to back it up too, because that's what you want to see at the end of the day. It's awesome. Katie, what about you?
I would say carousel posts have been working really well for us. We do a lot more information and shareable quips in a lot of them, so you can kind of scroll through and see something relatable. So I think going back to relevancy and really what you want to be doing is making sure it's shareable, relevant, and goes back to your business.
Mhm. So kind of looking at our audiences now, because I think that has changed drastically in the last year. Sam, how are audience behaviors evolving across platforms, and what signals should marketers watch for as early indicators of change?
Great question. So I know we've said it before, and I'll die on this hill, right? That culture piece, that is really what's driving more engagement. I would say too, I know both Tori and Katie have spoken on this, but video, I feel like that's just such an important tool in our toolbox. And video, I find, shows the earliest indication of audience engagement, right? Because it's easy to scroll past something else. And it also makes some of the information or what you're sharing more accessible, right? Like if you've got a 3-minute video, somebody can listen to that while they're doing another task. Like, and it's not that they're not engaging with your content, but they're able to consume it without interrupting the flow of whatever they're doing as much. And so I feel like people are really, oh, excuse me, people are really enjoying video more, especially that short form video. And yeah, you can see sooner how that's how that's engaging people. And I think that's really driving audiences right now.
That's a really good point. And I'm curious because not everything can become a video. Like, what is your indication? Like, oh, this would be great for a short form video. Is there something that kind of cues you?
Yeah, I would say if it feels like something you'd want to have a conversation about, or something that maybe it's a little bit easier to say it versus just to put it in writing, that's when I really want to lean on video. Like you could text your friend and say, hey, you started working over there, how's it been? And you might shoot back a short message, right? You busy, you got something else going on. Yeah, great, love it. That's not going to sell anybody on anything. But if you've got a video, or a voice memo of somebody being like, dude, I'm loving it. I'm sitting right now on my couch, having my coffee while I'm getting prepped for my stand-up. You're like, okay, I'm seeing myself in there. So when it feels more like a story you could tell versus like a factoid, that's when I think you really want to prioritize video over another format.
That's a great answer. Um, Katie, what are your thoughts? How are you seeing audience behaviors evolve across platforms?
Yeah, tough answer to follow. That was perfect, Sam. But I loved, like, if it's something that you would send to your friend and want an answer for, that's kind of our biggest shift because I feel like people are less passive than they used to be, and they're more intentional about what they're consuming. So in that regard, it's like as you're scrolling, you can see, I don't know, like 15 to 30 videos or posts in a minute, which is insane. So I think looking at what our audience is sharing, saving, sending, those are the private interactions that people are actually talking about your content, where it used to be comments. People would drop everything in the comments and tell their whole life story. I've truly seen somebody making plans in the comment section before on one of our accounts, but we really want the quality comments and engagements, but that's really happening offline. So when you're doing your reporting, look at those saves and sends because that's what people are talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Like you're seeing posts maybe not get as many likes, but it's being saved thousands of times or shared thousands of times or stitched or whatever. So it feels like it's a newer metric that's all of a sudden really coming to the forefront. So Katie, what behavioral shifts are you noticing in your communities that you feel like maybe brands are overlooking or underestimating?
Yeah, I think content really has to feel really tailored to somebody, whether it's
Mhm.
their role in the B2B world or a challenge, a general human truth, anything of that sort. That's what you really need to focus on. It's kind of hard because you do have to make that adjustment from really brand or generic safe posts that has the approved messaging and something that's safe and you know what to say, but you want to make it so relevant to somebody else. But if you're going too salesy with your post or a little too broad and it doesn't have that insight to it, people tend to just scroll right by and just disengage.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So we have to talk about budget, right? I mean, wouldn't it be great to have unlimited budget in, our social media programs and be able to do whatever we want? But that's not the reality. In fact, we're seeing some budgets are stagnant or are shrinking. So this question is for all three of you. When budgets are tight and expectations are high, what trade-offs should brands be making to get maximum impact with minimum waste? And Tori, why don't you start?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest waste of budget is trying to be everything to everyone across every platform. I've really learned that slicing and dicing just to check a box and say you're on a certain platform, it really doesn't work. When you're tight on budget, I think you have to be a little ruthless and have the guts to pull the plugs on things that aren't working and not take too long to make that call. So just commit to doing a few things well based on your specific brand and where your audience is engaging. And I think that's different for everyone.
That's a great answer. Ruthless seems like a really important, like key characteristic of someone in social media. You're moving so fast, you kind of have to just be like, nope, we're done with it and moving on. Sam, Katie, what about you guys?
Um, I feel like, excuse me, maybe this goes without saying, but quality over quantity, right? We're not really in a place anymore where it's like you need to be posting once a day or this many times or always on Wednesdays. Like that, it doesn't work like that anymore. And so if you have a tight budget, whether that's in terms of team capacity or what you're able to produce, I would rather see a brand put 1 to 2 like really good engaging posts out over the course of a month than to have a bunch of content out there that's not really hitting. Because when you're putting out that quality piece, people are wanting to stop and look at it more versus if you're putting out, just a ton of stuff to kind of fill the noise. And I think too, prioritizing the way your messaging can showcase whatever it is you're trying to present. So for instance, if you're trying to generate leads, instead of putting out something about like, hey, did you know we did this? Like partner with a customer who loves your product and get them to do a testimonial, even if it's something quick or a video or just tagging the brand. Having that authentic communication and like I said, those higher quality pieces, I think are going to take even a budget of zero way further than if you're able to just throw money at something without really putting heart in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved your quality over quantity. I think I say that to Casey probably like once a month. But I also think you need to prioritize your business strategy over volume. So if you really want to be the brand that's standing out or driving leads, you need to just make sure your social team also knows that because that's totally different strategies. We've killed so many different platforms along the way as budgets have shifted over the years. So whether it's turning off a Facebook post because you're just not getting engagements or leads there and you want to pivot and focus into Instagram or TikTok, just make sure you know that's what your business goal is. Because if you're on every platform, you're just kind of being there to be there without saying, no, we're focusing on Meta because that's where our lead driver posts are coming from.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great answer. And that kind of brings up a question that I saw in our Q&A chat. So curious if any of you guys have thoughts on this. And Katie, you kind of touched on it already. is it better to dominate on one platform or maintain presence across five? And if you're seeing, those alarm bells in your mind where like, we really shouldn't be putting time and effort towards Facebook, what kind of conversation are you having with leadership or with your clients to convince them to put pause on the platform?
Yeah, I can start this because I think you can do a couple of things. I would look at you can repurpose top performers if you do want to be on all of your platforms and just make some shifts and kind of syndicate it. I think that's kind of what we've been doing for a long time. But fewer, stronger content pillars can also help with that, where you're just saying, okay, we're doing one engagement post this week and one maybe like really trendy shareable post this week, and that's it. And then like all of your focus goes on those two. And then going back to your business goals, if the client's really saying, we really want leads, then really dive into what type of content is driving those leads and full send on that and pivot away from the other ones. And maybe that could look like making more videos for a month. Maybe it's an extra post because you're not doing something on another platform. So you can kind of get creative within your scope and kind of how you work with them.
And Sam, another question that we got in our chat, how do you decide which platforms maybe deserve a paid bump or paid support versus, purely organic efforts? Is that something that you ever come across in your work?
So I'd say, touching on something that Katie said earlier, data is going to be your friend here. Data is the way that we can tell our story, but also support what we know to be the best path forward as social media managers, content creators. So when you're looking at paid, I would first ask yourself, what are we trying to achieve here, right? Are we trying to drive people to the website, to sign up for this webinar, to apply to these open roles? And I would do, kind of small tests. I would A/B test it, this type of ad versus this type of ad, and then look at the metrics. Are people engaging in this? Are we seeing any sort of conversion? And if not, it is okay to just walk away from something, right? Like that's one of the best parts about social or digital marketing is you don't have to keep with it. We haven't built a physical structure. We haven't done something that cannot be undone, or we need to continue forward with the investment. You can simply stop doing it. And so if you're seeing that, hey, we're doing really well here, but not so well here, okay, cut your losses on Instagram and focus your advertising on this other platform. And then let's do some more testing on that. Does this type of ad perform better than this type of ad? And you can start small. You don't have to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in paid search or paid ads just because you can. Like, take those small steps, because when you have the metrics to back up what you're saying as the subject matter expert, you're presenting an objective argument for what is best versus, I feel like we should do this. And especially with leaders, or if you have someone who's maybe hesitant to invest more, that's going to show them, okay, we've done the legwork and we're showing you now what should be done. And we have, the I was going to say the chops, that feels wrong. We've got the stuff to prove it. We put our money where our mouth is. So let's keep talking over here.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it. It's like, you got to get them to buy in, but not just for a moment in time. You've got to give it time to like build and test and get results in, because it's scary in the beginning when you're not necessarily getting the results right away. But sometimes these things need to sit out there or require a month or a certain amount of budget to test out. All right. So it wouldn't be talking about, what's in and what's out and trends if we didn't talk about influencers. So Katie, in the B2C world, are you using influencers? And if so, how are you using them and finding them?
Yes. So we're still using influencers for a couple of our accounts. We've kind of shifted to more of creator partners, not just your traditional scripted campaigns, because I think everybody knows an ad a mile away. So we really want to find those partners that maybe they're more niche creators or micro creators that really know their audience and that's the audience that we're trying to reach. So I think that's kind of been the biggest shift, is it's really storytelling, leaning on the influencers to talk to their audience the way they would versus how the brand would. But for lately, we've been finally finding them natively. We've been building this massive internal spreadsheet with all sorts of influencers, which has been a huge help. But I do think AI can also support the process along the way. If you're building spreadsheets, analyzing data, there's also a ton of tools to help with this. But if you see if you follow a lot of creators or journalists or any other influential people, I think those can also be your influencers in different regards.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. And it's interesting to hear from the B2C perspective because I know in the B2B world, especially like the technology enterprise tech world, it's hard. I feel like there isn't one singular platform or repository where I can find the influencers for cybersecurity or AI and stuff. It's manual still. It's a lot of searching and it's a lot of like, does this person kind of align with our company's brand voice or not? And I think it's still a very manual process and you really still need, strong human hand involved. When you engage with influencers, I mean, are you very like, is it very transactional? Do you have a really strong contract in place? Because at the end of the day, it is kind of a business deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a set budget, we have a contract, but that's also something and a brief truly with the client. So it's similar that in the way that you would set it up with a creative campaign and a creative brief, you're briefing somebody to make a video to experience your brand or speak on your behalf. So we have that already in place. So by the time we connect with an influencer, this is exactly what we need to be said. At least one of these, try this. But honestly, if they have another idea, that's kind of where the collaboration and magic happens. So then you could say, okay, that's approved and let's go from there. But we do have contracts on our end.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I want to shift a little bit to talk about, some metrics and return on investment. Sam, are you seeing stronger ties between social media and pipeline? Are you working closely more with, marketing and sales in your field?
I would say yes. Kind of what I touched on earlier, I'm managing the employer brand and I'll be honest, when I first started with Applied 4 years ago, like there just wasn't the team. We didn't have the capacity for that. And a lot of our people-centered content, it sounded like it was written by a robot. And that was like the general consensus among the organization, like we got to switch this up. And so the first tie that we saw was once we really had that people-centered approach, we started getting the engagement that we wanted. And as we've continued to evolve that strategy and focus on, not just this is what we do, but this is why we do it. These are the people who are doing it. We're seeing a stronger conversion in terms of like candidate pipeline. If we're telling our story well and in an exciting way, not only are we directing more candidates to our, LinkedIn Life pages or our built-in profile, but we're seeing people who are more interested, from the jump. They're not just here because they're trying to get any job. They're here because they want to work with Applied Systems. And you've got people who are more passionate, more excited, more educated. And so the more that we have prioritized that sort of content, the stronger our pipeline has become.
Awesome. That's a great answer. And I've got a question from our Q&A for anyone, any three of you to answer. How are you tying social metrics more directly to business outcomes in 2026? Curious if you're drawing more of a direct line this year.
I'll jump on that because that is something that we've put focus onto. So trying to quantify something like culture, right, can be difficult outside of an engagement survey or, sort of that feedback. So what we've put a lot of focus on is what does the overall health of the employer brand look like and how is that driving business objectives? So when we can say we've put out this content, we've positioned ourselves on these platforms, and we're seeing, a reduced time to hire. We're seeing a lower percentage of turnover within the first year, right? Like your new hires are the people who are most excited about being there. So when you see more of them staying and you see higher quality candidates coming in, and I know I keep talking about it from a candidate perspective, but you can apply this anywhere, right? When you see the quality of your engagement going up, you have a way to quantify this work is important and this work is driving business objectives. Our overall objective is to be the best insurance technology company with the best people in the industry. And if I can take the work that I'm doing and show, hey, this is how that content and that narrative is improving these other facets of the business and allowing us to achieve these things more quickly and move the needle on that goal, then I find that it's really worth investing in.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Kind of jumping off of that, Katie, I'm curious, from the clients that you work with and like their leadership team. So maybe not, the marketing or social media person that you're directly working with, but their boss or their boss's boss. Are there any KPIs that are mattering more to them now than they did before?
I think engagement rate still does, but I think click-through rate and just overall leads and web sessions for one of our clients, they're really focused on just overall driving leads and sales. So that's kind of our North Star, and we always know that. But if we look at all of our content, we're getting good engagement overall. And there's some posts that are doing really well in web sessions. Those are the posts that will boost. Those are the posts that will say, okay, we're going to do 2 more of these this month because they did really well in leads. And that's what we really want to track for the brand. So that's always an exciting one, especially in looking at annual reports to say, look at everything we did. It's great from a social perspective, but it did also drive leads, web sessions, and time on the website.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. All right. Well, we've got to talk about AI, right? I mean, that's a big part of what we're all thinking about for 2026. So, first question I want to kick off is for Tori. How should teams use AI in workflows without losing brand voice or trust?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I think AI should be your intern and not your author. So we'll use AI to create several versions of something, like copy, for instance, but an actual human is editing it and making that final call. I think if a customer were to sense that an AI wrote your whole strategy, they would feel like they're talking to a machine, and you really want them to feel like they're talking to a partner. I even think about this writing emails, I never want an email I send to sound like an AI wrote it. It just sounds a little bit too fake. So I think making sure that you're always editing and tweaking.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And we did just get a question in the chat about like how do you prevent AI from flattening brand voice? It seems like your answer there is kind of aligned. Just it sounds like you really do have humans involved every step of the way.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Katie, how are you using AI on the agency side?
Pretty similarly, I think I use it quite a bit for brainstorming any angles and drafting frameworks because I think what it spits out, there's a lot of good nuggets within the first like 5 post examples, but there's something within that third option that's like, oh, let me build this out a little bit further, and then it can kind of build an idea off of that. But I do think, especially to maintain your brand voice, you definitely need a human eye to look at it. You change your formatting, know what you're saying, because if you don't believe in what you're presenting, that doesn't really make sense. But we also really focus on custom GPTs for each of our clients. So if you're working across a team and you say, hey, I can't write this post right now, can you write it? We've got that GPT as that intern to say, here's where everything lives. And then we've really nailed it down with all of our feedback, everything that we've kind of created. But that's a huge win that our team has started to develop.
That's really interesting. And before we move on to the next question, how do you just at a high level, how do you set that up? How do you say, hey, start writing, sample content for this brand? What do you prompt it with? What do you inform it with so that it's doing good versions right at the gate?
Yeah, there's so much you can send it. If it's for pitching, you could do press releases, work that's been approved. You can send some of the content calendars and posts that you really liked, and then feed all of that information. You can do some exports from your social pages and put it directly there. But I think that's kind of to start to say, like, this is the brand voice, here's all the information. And then from there, give it feedback and take the time to kind of grow that voice.
Right. Awesome. So Sam, how are you using AI today? And where does it create real strategic advantage versus just like operational efficiency? It's saving you minutes.
Yeah. So it'll take a little bit of setup, but kind of to Katie's point, I built out agents within our AI, and I've built out an external comms and an internal comms. And, I've fed it our EVP documentation, narrative pieces that I've written, all kinds of things. It essentially telling it, this is the voice, this is the brand. And so for me, to both Katie and Tori's point, the AI never produces the content that's, the final cut, but it does cut down on that editing timeline, right? You can give it instructions, this needs to be for this type of audience, maintain this brand voice, tighten it up, cut it down. And so I know that is to an extent operational efficiency, but I also think it's a strategic advantage, especially in a remote environment, right? You're not able to walk down to your colleague's desk and say, hey, what do you think about this? And so AI in that way can help you troubleshoot, right? Like, what are the potential pitfalls here? What are the holes you see? How can I augment this part of the brand voice without losing the meaning of the content? And so I feel like when you leverage it in that way, and the more you prompt it and it can learn from you, it does help you to kind of offload part of that editing process so you can have the space to think more strategically.
Yeah, it's a great point. So question for the group in the chat, and anyone's welcome to take this one. What guardrails should teams be establishing before integrating AI into their workflows?
I'd really make sure any information is not confidential that you're putting in there. Everything's kind of, if you need to remove some stuff, we're lucky to have kind of that enterprise level. So I think we've been able to put more in there, but I do think really making sure that you're not releasing any data that wouldn't want to be shared externally. But I feel like knowing when to use it and when not to, and really making sure you have that human voice at some level would be one of the first guardrails.
Right.
I'd also say using a closed system, right? ChatGPT is open source. At Applied, we use Microsoft Copilot. And so we are able to put in, not only those brand voice pieces, but some of that more sensitive information that we're not ready to share externally. And I think that makes a really big difference because I'm not having to think about, okay, is someone going to be able to have access to that? Like, no, my organization has access to it and they would have access to it anyway. And so I think that's a really important guardrail.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great one. And I think Tori rounds it out with you still got to have that human involved. Like AI should not be generating your post start to finish, and there's no hand in between, because I don't think they're that good yet. And it's we can tell, So what about using AI in the future? Tori, how would you like to use AI more strategically in the future?
Yeah, something I would love to use AI for would be to have it kind of act as an early warning system for creative fatigue. I feel like we don't always know when an ad has run its limit until we're seeing the CPL spike in real time. And so I think it'd be great if AI could kind of predict that ahead of time and warn us, and then maybe automatically swap in a different variant in its place. I feel like Facebook has a very less advanced version of this, and LinkedIn doesn't have anything kind of like this. So that would be really helpful to me.
Yeah, that's really cool. Kind of like your canary in a coal mine for when something's run its course. Katie, what about you?
I think we could use it more strategically right now, especially in predicting trends. I think everybody kind of uses it to work alongside of you, but if there is something where you could say, and maybe this is something I just need to put into my work stream, but really what are the emerging trends to watch this week? What is happening? What was the big takeaway? What have people been talking about on this video? And really taking the time to dig through so many comments, because sometimes there are a bunch and there's a lot of conversations happening across the internet that you don't even know about and somebody else did. So I think using AI to really be your second set of eyes so you can be offline for maybe a minute each week, that would be huge.
Awesome. Yeah. Is anyone or any of you guys using AI for reporting, streamlining metrics reporting or analyses on the back end?
Not for, well, maybe this is it. The way that I look at our brand health, we're taking pieces from HR ops, we're taking it from TA, from social, from a lot of other platforms. And so I do find it helpful when I present, upload the raw data and say, what are the, give me the top 3 ways I can overlay the data that will be the most impactful in telling this story, right? Like, can what using it to identify maybe something that you hadn't thought about? And I think it helps cut down on the time a lot when you're trying to present really impactful metrics. I mean, AI, I think, was built for numbers first and storytelling second. And so using it in that way, I think, is really impactful.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to move on to some rapid fire tips and takeaways before we round out today's webinar. So I'd like to hear from all of you guys for these final 2 questions. First off, what is one thing every marketer should prioritize on day 1 after this webinar? Tori, you want to get us started?
Yeah. Okay, I think my tip would be type your brand name into the search bar on LinkedIn and don't hit enter. Just notice the suggested searches that show up below your brand name and see whether users are looking for training or a recent news update. And just pay attention to what these are and see if there's anything you can do to align your existing content or anything upcoming with the phrases that people are really looking for.
That's a great one.
Sam? I would say audit your content and really make sure you can answer why did we post this or why did this do well, and make sure that's part of your brand strategy is why are we on social? Why are we posting this? What's going on? Because I think that's where your leadership will find the most value. If they ask, why are we doing this? You have that answer right off the bat.
I would say, it sounds silly, but make sure you really, really understand your brand voice and not the brand guide, but the nuances within it. How do you communicate an educational piece of content versus just something exciting and fun? Like, make sure you have a firm grasp on that, because it doesn't matter how good the content is that you make. Nothing will feel authentic if it feels like your voice and like that heart, that human component is not in it. So I think that, because once you really have that brand voice down, everything else comes easier.
Awesome. These are great. All right. And if you were building a 2026 social strategy from scratch today, what would you prioritize first, Tori?
Yeah, I think we've touched on this a lot, but hands down, I would prioritize employee advocacy. I really believe in it. I think just as we've talked about all the AI generated content, it's really happening that people trust people now. And I would build a strategy where the brand's experts are the primary creators. And then if you can, amplify that with a smart paid social budget.
Sam, Katie?
Tori like literally took the words out of my mouth, because I'm
great
with
answer.
you. Like, the employee advocacy is such an important, or your user advocacy. So I would say once you've identified those people, identify also what matters most to your audience. What are they looking at you for? What are they seeing you as the subject matter expert on? And then align those 2 things, right? You know what matters to your audience. You know the people who are passionate about those things. Marry those together, prioritize that. And I feel like the impact of that joint voice is so much bigger than just, a kind of a standard or traditional content strategy.
It's a great one.
I loved the people follow people conversation. We just did a workshop with one of our clients on that. And when it came down to it, all of a sudden we said, okay, so like who is your brand persona? And nobody could think of a celebrity or anybody it looked like. We were like, okay, then we need to shift this into something new. But we've been operating with it for so long. And then you take a step back. Who are we talking to? Who are we? And then I do think you've got to get comfy with your brand voice. But I would also, for a 2026 strategy, look at your audience behavior and know who you're trying to talk to and who you're actively talking to, because you're talking to so many different people with the different algorithms. I think figure out who's your decision-making audience and then really dive into that.
Yeah, these are all such great answers. All right. Well, we've got about 4 minutes left. I want to open it up and see if there are any other Q&As coming in from our audience for our panelists before we wrap it up today. And feel free to drop in the Q&A function and I can filter through there.
Too good, Casey. It was too comprehensive.
Too comprehensive. That's fine because I've got plenty more questions to round it out. And this is something that I'm curious about as well. We talked about people, like people follow people, people follow brands. I feel like so many of what you guys shared was just people centric. How important is it for a brand, if they're like a B2B company, to have that talking head or that familiar face as a consistent presence on their social platforms? Is that something that you guys are doing more of, or are you guys shifting away from?
I think we've been shifting into it. I think that's kind of the next move is once you know who you're talking to, if you have somebody that represents that kind of content or can humanize the brand a little bit more, I think that would be a huge win to put into your strategy.
Awesome. Another question that just got dropped in, and I think we've touched on this, but we can use the last couple of minutes to expand on. Is there an audience behavior shift that brands are underestimating that we're not paying attention to? And maybe this kind of goes off of what you guys were wrapping up with.
I'd say there's sometimes this tendency to kind of rest on your laurels we see with brands, right? There has to be that push to evolve. Like all of us have been saying, right? You know, people want to be able to identify, your customers want to buy from a brand whose values align with their own. And so you cannot continue to say, especially with how quickly things move, well, this is how we've done it and it's performing well enough. Well enough doesn't matter. You need to have that drive to continue to push forward, because when you aren't looking at how can we be, you know, changing and evolving to message this better, people will stop engaging because it feels stale.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. All right. Well, we are nearly at time. I wanted to take this last minute to thank all of you guys for joining us today. You guys were a fantastic group of panelists. I believe we've dropped all of your LinkedIns in the chat. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us or contact one of our awesome panelists directly if we weren't able to touch on it today. But thank you all so much for coming today. All right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.